Hey guys, Phil here, and it's mid-August, and you know what that means. Well, if you're a deer hunter, you know what that means. It's time to start thinking about deer season. So looking at the food plots that we've got across the property, we put in 2 food plots last year. One really didn't do anything because of the drought. One we were able to water just a little bit, and it did something last year. Well, I let it grow up, and I just cut it the other week. I did a video of that, and now there's all sorts of stuff coming up because we let everything just go to seed. And of course the clover that was in there is perennial. It came back. So there's some grass in there that we're going to end up spraying this upcoming weekend. In the truck here, I've got several hundred pounds of lime that we're going to spread on another plot. I've got some seed, picked up some other stuff today, some spray, and what I'm doing out here right now is just going to surveying because it's been wet. This August is actually the wettest month of the year officially, and we're only halfway through it. So that's largely due to the hurricane came through, dropped 3.5 inches of rain, and here in the last several days we've had a number of different storms and downpours come through. I was actually watching the radar today. This is the reason I came out here this evening. Watching the radar today, there was one line of storms that just stayed here for about 2.5 hours, and I wanted to come out and see how wet everything was. So it looks like the rain that came down, it must have been more steady and not super heavy, because there's nothing that's like washed out that I've seen. But I just parked the truck up here by the shed. I'm gonna hop on the 4-wheeler. It was actually one of the reasons I got the 4-wheeler. That's a recent acquisition if you haven't been following along. Is that I got tired of, whenever the property is wet and soft, I got tired of driving my truck everywhere and creating muddy ruts everywhere. So the 4-wheeler is going to help me get around the property and not create such a mess everywhere. We'll also check in back here. We're thinking about doing a food plot back here where I did the drainage project. Showed a couple videos of that, and if that looks like it's gonna stay in good shape, we might put a food plot in over there this year, or we might just plant some ryegrass to build the soil. I'm not 100% sure what we're gonna do back there yet, but we'll go back and check the bucket. The bucket's been sitting out there. The bucket's what I'm using as my rain gauge. Rain gauge is broken. We'll check the bucket. I have not emptied it since the hurricane came through, and it's been about, I don't even know, what's today's date? 8-9 days, 10 days since the hurricane came through. So we'll see all of the rain that's been dropped since the hurricane, minus whatever's evaporated from the bucket, and then we will take a look at last year's food plot. We'll go take a look at the drainage area, and we'll survey a couple things here, and I'll share some thoughts with you along the way. So follow along, let's have a little fun. That's our big old fire pit, and I can see from here the sunflowers are looking good. Let's zoom in on them. There they are, looking good. We'll go over and check them out in a little bit. So there's my bucket on the back of the hay wagon. I set this out just before the hurricane came through. That was on August 3rd. It's now August 13th. Or was it 3rd or 4th, 5th when the hurricane came through? I don't remember. Anyway, less than 2 weeks. And I can see from here the bucket is half full. So how much rain is that? I didn't bring anything to measure. That was foolish. I had this laminated piece of paper on the 4-wheeler. I can put that in there, and I can see, all right, it is just past the staple. The staple that had this sign hanging up. So that's just past that. We know standard piece of paper is 11 inches tall, right? So there's a little 1/4 inch of the lamination down there at the bottom. So anyway, it's well over halfway. So 5.5, 5 3/4, maybe close to 6 inches of rain. So perhaps 6 inches of rain here in the last 2 weeks. That is just crazy. We never see anything like that in August. So obviously, look around. This grass is growing just like crazy. This whole field was cut before the hurricane. So 10 days ago, all this was cut, and now you can see how much of it is already popping out seed heads in that grass. It's absolutely insane. So we're gonna need to get out here and cut all this again. So this area here was last year's food plot. I just bush hogged this. We just let it grow up. So it was waist-high grass and weeds here just a couple weeks ago. Last year when we put in this food plot, the whole thing was sprayed with glyphosate. We put down a seed mix, we put down clover, we put down some brassicas, we put down some lime, we put down some fertilizer. And last year in August, September, we had a pretty good drought going and we didn't get to water this all that much, but it did come up a little bit. There were a whole bunch of turnips that ended up growing through the winter, and the plot did get grazed a little bit by the deer, but it wasn't hit real hard. Last year's winter was also really mild, and there's plenty of food supply around, so I don't think they needed to hit it hard. But anyway, this year, what I'm really surprised about is that since we cut this just a couple weeks ago, we let all this go to seed. Last year, it was waist-high grass before we cut it, and now if you look around, you see all these white clover flowers everywhere. So all that clover that we put in last year is really starting to come in nicely. And if we look closely, some of the different greens and I don't know if it's turnips or radishes or what, but they're all starting to come back. So what we let go to seed last year is coming back in here real nice. So that's pretty cool. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's some milkweed, some butterfly weed. I don't even know what that stuff is. That's everywhere. There's a lot of grasses. So I think what we're going to try to do to this plot is just, I think we're just going to spray the grasses. I'm fine if the milkweed stays. And as I look around, there's not that much other broadleaf in here except for this stuff. I don't know what that is, but there's a lot of it. But I think if we can control the grasses in here, the clover and the brassica should really be able to take off. So I think that's pretty cool. As our first food plot, not really having any experience prior with any kind of food plots, I'm surprised to see what comes back. Of course, I knew if I let everything grow up, it should go to seed. I just didn't know what to expect in terms of like how much will actually come back. So the amount of brassicas that are in there is pretty cool. Shouldn't really have to spread too much. I've got about I don't know, pound and a half of clover seed in the shed that I can spread down there. Let some more clover come up and we'll see where it goes from there. All right, so next up we'll go check on the sunflowers real quick, and then we'll go over to the wet part that I was telling you about, what we're thinking about putting in a food plot. There's our sunflower patch. It's about a 1/4 acre, several thousand blooms in here. It is nice and full with blooms right now. It's looking nice. A bunch of monarch butterflies and swallowtail butterflies and a bunch of bees all through here. So cool to see nature at work with the flowers that we've supplied them. All right, now I'm going to go over to what I call my problem area, which is where I did all the drainage work. That's another area where we could put in a food plot. We tried to put in a food plot last year, but because of the drought, it didn't end up doing anything. I could either explore the food plot, or I could just plant some ryegrass and try to build the soil over there and just kind of keep working it and improving it for a future use. I don't know. We're kind of figuring it out as we go. So we'll go take a look at it, see how much damage the rain's done over there, and see how wet it is. So here's my problem area. This little fence row here is my property line, where this is a power line trail here that has to, you know, maintain a right of way for the power lines, and water flows in from the neighboring property over there, comes right down in here, and all last year water would just sit in here and actually would fill up all this area. It'd fill up that area on the other side of the tree, and all this was just a swampy mess. And right now, frankly, it looks a little bit like a swampy mess, but I know that it rained for a few hours. And if I look closely down here in this little ditch that I dug, water is flowing. Water is flowing. So this is draining. Some of this just needs some more grading work. There's just water sitting in a couple of these little holes here. This little groove here, this little section, is a subsoiler road that I dug, and right now we can see water's just kind of sitting in it and sitting next to it right there. So this needs a little bit of grading work. I'm walking on the subsoiler row right now and it is crazy soft. I'm going to walk down to the end of these subsoiler rows and we'll hopefully be able to see if any water is flowing out of these things. Yeah, so I've seen this in other parts of my property when I've done subsoiling. You'll get a heavy rain and water will flow kind of just under the ground. It will flow within that groove that was cut by the subsoiler. This right here looks like where water has eroded the inside of the subsoiler row, and it's kind of ended up collapsing what we see here. Yeah, I just stepped down in that as far as I'd like to step. Went up to my calf, so that's kind of interesting. There's a fresh deer track right there. Little crayfish chimneys everywhere all throughout this now since it's been so wet. So you can see how the water is just sitting in these little subsoiler grooves. If we can get some dry weather, I'm curious to see how quickly this ends up draining. Right now, obviously, it's really wet. And then down here on the low part, there's actually quite a bit of water flowing. So this is the other section here where I just kind of walked you through all this little drainage stuff, where we're thinking about putting in a food plot. If it stays this wet though, we really can't put anything in here. But if it can dry out, then this, you know, could become a pretty suitable food plot area. We are pretty secluded here. We're at the back end of what we call our hidden field. You can't see this little plot from anywhere else on our property, so it would make a pretty good spot. It's just the soil is very heavy clay, and when it rains a lot, this stays wet for an extended period. At least it has in the past. I'm hoping all this drainage work that I've done will help alleviate some of that, but that's what we're thinking. So the two plots that I showed you, either next to the sunflowers or over here, maybe both. I think I only have seed to do one. I'd have to buy some more, but that's what we're thinking for this upcoming season. So if you guys are deer hunters, you have some thoughts about putting in food plots and what to do with these different parts of the property, you know, I'm always open to hearing what you guys have to say too. So I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks for following along today, checking out our little property and seeing some of the challenges that we're having with this recent rainfall. So if you've got any questions or comments, obviously leave those below. Thanks for following along, guys. We'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.